and it opened up by itself. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. In today's video we're doing the rear shock replacement on a Honda. I have a 2010 Honda Insight. And this type of a shock is installed on many other Hondas. Honda Insight is fairly similar to Honda Fit, and Honda Civic is, depending on the year of course, it's pretty much the same type of a shock and installation. So for this replacement I'm going to be using Koni orange shocks. Here is the box it comes in. Here is the port number. Left and right are the same shocks. There is no difference between left and right, unlike the front struts. So this Koni orange is not exactly what is supposed to be used on Honda Insight, but if you don't have a Honda Insight, if you have something else, then you may find an exact fitment. Just because Koni does not produce a shock that fits, that is an exact replacement for the factory shock. So the lower part of the shocks are exactly the same. There's a rubber bushing, there is a metal bushing in the middle, the size and everything is exactly the same between these two. That's where the length difference is. We can see that there is about an inch. The orange Koni are about an inch shorter, but like I said, the body of the shock is a bit bigger in diameter. The shaft of the shock is exactly the same. The threads and the lengths, overall length, is pretty much identical. The installation for the upper part is exactly the same. It's exactly the same threads and everything, so there is no worries about that. So this shock, I think it's an original 2011. I'm not 100% sure. This is a Honda original shock, so I already have removed one of them. Here's some used hardware that was on this shock. Koni comes with some of these things that are, there's a bushing, there is a large washer, there is a smaller washer, and there is a nut. And there is a difference between upper nuts. Honda original is a 14mm, and Koni, what Koni provides is a 17mm hex. Well, otherwise, like I said, you have all new hardware for the shock. You have some installation instructions. As far as what tools you need to get the job done, first of all, you need a jack, of course. Then you have to have a stand to safely work on the car while it's up in the air. Breaker bar, that's really needed for lug nuts and such. An impact wrench, small size, can be helpful, but not really needed. 19mm socket for lug nuts, a ratchet, a flat screwdriver, an extension or two. I'm holding this 5mm hex L-wrench. That's to hold the shock's shaft from spinning. A 14mm wrench to remove the upper nut, and 17 if you're going to be using the new Koni's provided, the nut provided by Koni. If not, if you're reusing the original Honda nut, 14mm wrench is enough, and that's pretty much all. Now let's get to the replacement itself. First of all, you have to loosen up lug nuts somewhat. Using the jack, lift the car up. One side or two sides, up to you. I'm doing one side at a time. I'm going to remove the wheel now. Comes off like that. At this point I can install the stand to make this work, to be a bit safe. And now we're ready to get to the shock itself. To get to the upper shock mount, you have to remove this cover. That's where the jock is. This is the right side, passenger side, and the shock mount, the upper shock mount, is going to be right here. Like I said, this is a 14mm. So this is the nut. This is the upper washer. And that's pretty much all for this part. On the driver's side or left side there is a smaller cover. This is just purely the shock mount access cover. There's nothing else behind it. That's where you use a flat screwdriver. I recommend to use some kind of a plastic clip tool removal, but this is a Honda, I don't really care much, and there is a special place where you can put a flat screwdriver like that, and just a cover. There is the upper shock mount on this side. So now we are under the car. The next thing to do is to remove this bolt. This is the lower shock mount, and this bolt is a 14mm hex. That's the bolt, a bit rusty. And now we can remove the shock out of the core. Like so. Now we are ready to disassemble the upper part of the shock, and because we have to reuse the bump stop, if you're buying the bump stop and so on, you don't have to. And in my case, this dust boot is all in pieces, it's all destroyed, so this needs to be replaced. If you run into the same situation, you have to improvise or just replace the dust boot. And here is the bump stop that has to be either transferred, or if you buy something new, just use your new bump stop. Not going to use this, not going to, maybe, well, that needs to be reused, the upper mounts. So out of all these parts, I'm going to be using what's new. I think this is the lower washer, I have to reuse this. The shock mounts, rubber, these pieces either have to be replaced. If they're in a good shape, they can be reused. These look good. The bump stop looks decent, I'm going to reuse it. This goes on like this. Then you're ready to basically reinstall or install your new shock. Everything reassembles in the reversed order, so I guess there isn't a whole lot to show. Shock goes in like so. I'm going to put this bolt here. Nice and orange. I'm not going to use a torque wrench, but you should. Make sure that the upper bushing for the upper mount sits in place properly. I'm going to be using this new washer, and I'm going to be using this new nut. And this one is 17mm, unlike the original that was 14. It's got nylon in it, as we can see. So it's locking type of a nut. Try not to drop it in any of these open spaces, because yeah, it goes down fairly deep. Something like that. So this whole sandwich, so here's how this works. You cannot over compress the upper mount because it is a sandwich, and what defines the height of the sandwich is this bushing. So in essence, you have this washer on the bottom, on the shaft of the shock, then you have this bushing, then you have this washer, and then you have this nut. So this space between these two washers, well, there is another washer on the bottom, but in essence, that this space between washers is where the upper mount bushings are going to be sitting. So the compression is going to be set by the length of this, by this bushing, basically. So you cannot really over compress, like I said, the upper mount, because this is what's limiting the compression. And as far as torque, you basically run this nut down until the bushings compress and everything just bottoms out against metal against metal against this bushing. And that's pretty much all with this installation, really. I mean, that's how this works, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say. This wrench is long enough to set the torque properly. Don't over torque it, it's not going to go anywhere. And put this cover back on. So now the wheel goes back on. We can remove the stand at this point, our safety item. jug goes out of the way. For the lug nuts, you should use a torque wrench, something like this, to properly set the torque on these nuts. Click, click, and click here. There you go. The job is done.